Yes,
Yep.
I can.
Hello.
We can hear you. Oh, BJ sounds echoey, but
Oh, I think I got an echo. Yep, me and
Yeah, I can
echo.
hear you.
Maybe take yourself out.
okay.
Okay.
Okay, we are live. Hi, everybody, and thank you for your patience with us starting a couple minutes late. My name is Elisa McCall. I'm the Director of Conservation Outreach and a staff scientist at Polar Bears International. And we are so excited to be chatting with you today about Churchill polar bears, the kickoff of our polar bear season, and our theme today. Bye Bye Buggy One, which we'll dive into. I'd like to introduce you to my fellow panelists before we get started, though. First, I'll throw it over to Kyron to say hi. Okay,
With these guys. Yeah.
cool.
We'll be live in 2 minutes, just so you guys are aware. Yeah.
Okay, tell me when I should talk. I'll keep an eye on WhatsApp. Okay, I think we're live
Okay.
now. Okay, great timing with okay, great. Thank you so much everyone for your patience while we got our system up and running today. That is a train in the background you're hearing, one of our panelists. It's okay. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're so excited for polar bear season again. I'm Elisa with Polar Bears International. I'm a staff scientist and I oversee our conservation outreach programs. I'll introduce you to our other panelists. I'll throw it over to Kyron first. Thanks for joining
Hi,
today,
everyone.
Kyron.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa. I should say that's not a train on my end. I'd be quite surprised if there was a train out here in Buggyland. But my name's Kyra McIver. I work for PBI as the field operations manager in Churchill, Manitoba.
Thanks, Kyron. And let's go to the culprit of the train. We are so lucky to be joined today by BJ Kirschhofer. Hi, BJ.
Hey, great to be with you. Yeah, former PBIer, and now I work for explore.org and get to work on all the different cameras, Buggy One camera included.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It's so nice to be with you guys today. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into more of it, but worked with BJ for many, many years, and we're super sad when he left PBI, but luckily he didn't go far. And now we're so grateful he's working with explore.org. I know he's having a lot of fun, and we still get to hang out with him and rope him into things like this. So very much appreciated. Today, we are very excited to talk to everybody about our polar bear season, and our theme today is Bye Bye Buggy One. So this will be one of, if not the last broadcast from Tundra Buggy One, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're also very happy to chat with you about Churchill, about the polar bear cams, about polar bears, and what you might see this year on the cams. And you can see right below us right now on this cam. And Kyron, is this the Buggy One cam that's showing this bear right now? Or is this a lodge cam?
Yeah. Well, actually, we've got a number of bears around us. So we did have a
Okay.
sleeping bear on the Buggy One. And then I think we had counted around four, which included also mom and cub. So it's a good day out on the tundra right now.
Amazing. Yeah. So this polar bear is live right outside Kyron right now in Churchill, Manitoba, in the wildlife management area of Manitoba, just to the east of Churchill. So it's been a great season so far. It's kind of funny for me because I am almost always in Churchill at this time of year. This year, I happen to be going up a little bit later than usual, so I'll be there in 2 weeks. But it's just really neat to see how much action is already happening. And we know we've had some wonderful things on the cam already. I'm really excited for the next few weeks ahead here. So, for those that might be newer to Churchill and the Cams and to Polar Bears International, we are the only organization in the world that is solely focused on conserving wild polar bears. And we do this through a mix of research, policy, and outreach. And this includes our outreach, what we're doing today. And it's some of our most fun things to do because we get to bring polar bears to you and talk about how amazing they are and why we love them and why we're working to protect them. So if you do have questions today throughout the broadcast, please put them in wherever you're watching from. If you're on YouTube or the explore.org page or the polarbearsinternational.org page, plunk them in there. And we have our wonderful staff members behind the scene monitoring questions and sending them our way so that we can answer them for you. And I'll keep an eye on all my sheets and everything to make sure everything's looking good throughout the broadcast. So today is really a goodbye note and a goodbye love letter, maybe even to Tundra Buggy One. And BJ was one of the kind of OG drivers of Buggy One. He has probably no, you have definitely spent more time on Buggy One than any other human, BJ. So we kind of just wanted to introduce the buggy because it also has so much to do with our outreach and with bringing polar bears to people. And so I'd first just like to, yeah, let's introduce the buggy. And I know we have some visuals, and then BJ, I'll let you explain what is Tundra Buggy One.
Sure. So a Tundra Buggy is really it's a tourist vehicle. They're owned by Frontiers North Adventures, and they bring people up to the edge of Hudson Bay every season in the fall when the polar bears are gathering, and tourists pile on board and trundle around on the tundra and go look at polar bears. One of these buggies is very special. It was lent to Polar Bears International by Frontiers North Adventures many years ago and was turned into a mobile broadcast studio where we could do this kind of thing. That's where Kyron is standing right now. So you're seeing some outside shots of what these things look like. It's really more or less a tourist polar bear monster truck. Those tires are about 5.5 feet tall. They keep the people inside well out of reach and safe, and so people can just sit inside and sip a nice hot tea while they watch polar bears amble around the tundra outside.
So great. Yeah. And we should really reiterate their huge thank you to Frontiers North Adventures for Tundra Buggy One. It has been very generous. There's only so many permits that Tundra vehicles can have out there in this polar bear viewing area. And they have always given us a permit every fall to be on Tundra Buggy One, live streaming polar bears, doing outreach with people around the world celebrating polar bears. So we are so, so grateful for that. So, BJ, what was the first year you were actually out on Buggy One? Or like, how old is Buggy One? Because she's showing her age. She's so great. We love her so much, but she's showing her age. But she's earned that.
Yeah, so Buggy One was, as far as we understand, it was the first Tundra buggy that was out there,
Wow.
welded together by Len Smith, and I believe it was like something around 1979 that would have been the first year that this thing was out there. It had a different motor in it, it had a different cab on top, but really the wheels were pretty much the same, and the frame was basically the same, as well as kind of the general overall kind of build where there's a back deck that's outside, so you could be outside and see bears, or you could go inside where it's heated. I think it was about 2005, 2006. The top of Buggy One was replaced, maybe somewhere in there. The engine was replaced as well from gasoline to diesel, and the cab was made slightly larger, and then also with the help of both Dan Cox and Daniel Zatz, this kind of idea of it being more or less a media buggy was developed. Buggy One, or there was another streaming buggy. I wouldn't even call it streaming. There was someone, I think it was in the late '90s, that did have a streaming camera on top of the buggy, but this was back in the day when there hardly was streaming, and so it was a series of small pictures that were sent, and so you could kind of watch still frames of polar bears, as I understand it. And then when I got on the buggy in 2007, Polar Bears International was working with Real Networks. And for anybody that's my age or a little bit older, you might recognize the name Real Networks. I think they're long gone now, but this was a complicated but pretty advanced early technology of pushing video streaming over the internet so that people could watch it in a window. Now it's like so easy, right? Like we just do it from our phones. You can hit the go live button. You can go to YouTube or whatever and stream. Well, back in the day, this was very, very difficult. It required huge computers and a ton of technical expertise. And so that's, I was brought on board. We were trying to make this stuff work. It kind of worked. It was difficult. It broke a lot. But yeah, so that was my first year, and really my first job at Polar Bears International was just being in charge of the buggy, pointing the camera, and trying to make all this stuff work out there.
And was it your first year out there that you spent like 2 months straight on the buggy?
Yeah, like when I first got out there, of course it was very new, and I was super thrilled. Here I was given the job of like driving a monster truck around in polar bear land. So I thought it was just this is unbelievable. But yeah, they stuck me out there. I don't know, it was something like the end of September or something, and then I just stayed on that buggy all the way through. Gosh, maybe it was the end of August. I don't even remember, but it was a long time. And then, yeah, I came off the buggy at the very last week of November, almost the first week of December. So it was a long stretch. Literally watched the seasons change outside the window. Went from kind of nice outside to so cold. That old buggy there, the little screw heads on the floor would build frost on them because the floor was below freezing. So it went from quite warm to just freezing cold outside and freezing cold in the buggy as well.
Oh my gosh. And that was not I'm not gonna get graphic here, but well before a real bathroom was in there. And you would have barely touched the ground for like months in a row. That is wild.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, just living in the buggy. I mean, we would dock with the lodge every night, the
Hmm.
Frontiers North Tundra Buggy Lodge, and we'd get meals there and give presentations to the tourists and things like that. So we got out of the buggy, but yeah, I mean, largely off the ground for the entire season. And yeah, it was just a bucket in kind of a closet in the back room there. That's what the bathroom was. So it was a little more primitive than what it is now.
Yeah, no kidding. Kyron, maybe we could throw to you for a minute and you could kind of show, because you are in Buggy One right now. And so you can kind of see the size of it. Maybe you could give us like a super basic tour for those, especially for those that are pretty new to Buggy One.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting to hear like kind of some of that backstory now and then to think how far we've come in that time. And, this buggy is as old as it is, but we've always said there's only one buggy one, and for that reason, like we've taken extra special care of the buggy to kind of, maintain it for as long as we have. Right now, we've kind of got the buggy sort of bare bones, but we can do a walk through here. BJ had mentioned the mobile broadcasting studio. And so that's sort of this space here where we would have had panelists like myself. Oftentimes there'd be more than one. We do have some staff on board. You can see our studio lighting. We've got Christian here, and this is sort of our background tech person. That's where they typically sort of run the show. And so, BJ, you could probably talk lots about that. That's where you spent much of your time back in
Hmm.
your TC days. Just navigating to the back here, we'll squeeze by these folks. We've got bunk beds because we do spend multiple nights out on the buggy. And then we could just real quick here, crazy not to, we'll pop out on the back deck. And so you can see the Tundra Buggy Lodge. We're just the south side of the lodge right now. And we've got the surrounding area here. And like I said, I've kind of lost track off in the distance. I can see one bear, but there are about 4 bears that are sort of in the area right now. Let's go back inside.
Great. Yeah, we can do so much in that relatively small space. Yeah, a lot of nights spent on there, a lot of great times on that little buggy. Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, is it nice to be out there? We weren't even necessarily planning on driving Buggy One out this year, but you got her going really quick thanks to explore.org and FNA and BJ and yourself working hard and got the cams out there. So thanks for getting her going a little bit more here.
Yeah, it was kind of like you said, a last minute thing. And Frontiers North and Noble Northern, their mechanics got right to it. Got the buggy, the dust brushed off, and we headed out on the tundra, and kind of worked out really nicely. It's a good way for us to say bye bye to Buggy One. I feel like it's very appropriate. I'm
Yeah.
glad to have a couple more opportunities to get it out here, and then also to do these last tundra connections is really great.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, Thank you so much. So we do have a quick question here from NW Girl, maybe Northwest Girl. I know this is early, but what are the polar bear numbers like compared to other years? I feel like there seems to be a good amount of polar bears around right now for October 21st, but how are you feeling? You're the one there. I'm not there yet. What's it looking like?
I think through the summer they're having, good uh, sightings of bears, like they were around. We oftentimes will see them from the Beluga boat, which we operate during the summertime. It's kind of carried on now into the fall, and I think so far, yeah, the season's been off to a good start. We have our Climate Alliance group that we bring at the beginning of each season. It's kind of how we kick off the fall season, and they're very fortunate and got to see a number of bears. I would say though the weather it's fairly warm for this time of year. I mean, I've been kind of just wearing this all day where normally I might be in my parka by now. We spoke with some photographers in town, and they actually said around this time last year they had some photos of bears walking out on the frozen freshwater, so the ponds that are kind of in the area. So I'd say a little bit warmer right now, but the bears are moving around. As things start to chill off, we will see them getting a little bit more active, and hopefully we'll see, more bears coming into the area.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Karen. And I appreciate that context. For new viewers, you might be wondering, well, why is Buggy One there and why are you doing this and why are polar bears there? So, Churchill, where Kyron is right now, is on the coast of Hudson Bay, and Hudson Bay is home to several polar bear populations. Churchill itself is partly home to the western Hudson Bay population of polar bears. There are 20 populations across the Arctic. In this population and in this area, these bears have what's called seasonal sea ice. So all winter there is sea ice, and the bears are out there. They're hunting their main prey, seals. They're being polar bears. And then in the summer months, the ice completely melts. And so all these polar bears come back onto land and they hang out. And generally, they're pretty lazy because they don't have access to seal blubber on land. They need to preserve their body fat, body weight. So they take it pretty chill. We see a lot of bears laying down, kind of being lazy, like some of the bears you've seen on cam this morning already. As we march forward into the fall and toward the winter, the temperatures start to cool, and the bears know that hopefully soon the sea ice will be freezing again on Hudson Bay, and they can once again go out there to hunt and eat a lot of seal blubber, which I'm sure they're very excited for. As these temperatures cool down, we do see the bears that have been spread out kind of along the coast and a bit inland all summer. They start to move toward the coast. We can call it a migration. It's not technically a migration, but it's a gathering anyway. And where Churchill is in a very special spot where there's a lot of freshwater input and there are icy waters coming down from the Arctic, and we're kind of on a bit of a land shelf there. And so the ice starts freezing generally early there. And the polar bears know this. So they're gathering near Churchill. That's why Churchill is sometimes called the polar bear capital of the world. It has this annual gathering of many polar bears, and it makes it one of, if not the absolute best place in the world to watch polar bears at this time of year. And of course, tourism operators have known this for a while. BJ mentioned that this Buggy One began in about 1979, which is wild. She's like 40, over 40 years old, almost 50 years old. And then when technology improved, it became a wonderful spot to stream polar bears. And explore.org was one of the first organizations that realized this. And BJ, I was hoping you could talk about how you and explore.org kind of built this relationship in the cams. And if I'm not mistaken, the polar bear cams were one of their first, if not their first, wildlife cams. And now they have cams all around the world.
Yeah, so yeah, explore.org does have something like, I want to say, 200 cameras around the world, and the polar bear cam was one of the first. And I was back with PBI at the time when we got a call from an organization that said they would like to do help with the polar bear cam, and it was kind of interesting that someone wanted to come and help us out, because of course the challenges were pretty huge. They still are when you try to do this stuff from remote places, but especially back then. Now we can just plug into some satellite internet, which you just order on the internet, and boom, the stream goes, and it's all relatively easy. Back then, it was required multiple radio links that had to be set up and pointed at each other, and those things were kind of temperamental, and it required special cameras, and I mean, it was just a pile of hardware and tons of expertise, and really like weeks of setup. to just kind of make all this stuff work. And so, Polar Bears International and Explore.org built a partnership and a relationship, and ended up building a really cool cam network in the Churchill area. So it started with the polar bear cam, and then we expanded to the, kind of the year-round cameras out at Cape Churchill, and then we had the Aurora cam at the Churchill Northern Studies Center as well, and then it grew into the Beluga camera in the summertime. And so it really did. Churchill's such a special place, and Explore is eager to highlight these really interesting and neat animals, and so it ended up being really kind of a perfect partnership in my mind.
Right. Well, we were Polar Bears and Polar Bears International. So lucky and grateful to Explore.org, to Frontiers North Adventures, and to yourself. I know you mentioned it was hard, but I think it is really hard to explain the amazing things that you all accomplished together to make this happen. I'm not a tech person, and I feel like when you guys talk about this stuff, it's a whole other language sometimes. And back then, I first met you, BJ, in 2010. That was my first season on Buggy One. First time seeing a polar bear was with you. You showed me my first polar bear, actually. And what you could pull off then with the technology being what it was absolutely amazing. You're right. This was well before Starlink. And for classrooms, one of our favorite things to do from Buggy One is connect with classrooms. So have webcasts, these educational webcasts where students can learn about polar bears and ask scientists questions in real time and have a conversation with people, and just make science and conservation and polar bears just really accessible to kids. And this was incredibly hard to pull off, but it was also at a time where we were one of the first, what we would have had to be one of the first groups even offering things like online webinars. And I know you started even before 2010. And one of a story that always makes me laugh is like one of the very first events you guys did. It was like to Australia, wasn't it? That was one of the first live events you did from Buggy One in the
But we
dark.
did have a lot of Yeah, we did have a lot of. So back in the day, of course, Zoom wasn't around, or
Right.
whatever your flavor of video conference technology. Even Skype was, if you remember what that was. This was early days of that. So we were trying to adopt like corporate technology that you might find in a boardroom at a big company. And so
Ah,
Polycom was the name of this technology. And what you would do is you'd have an IP address for a school somewhere, and you'd dial in that school. And so you were kind of doing one classroom at a time. Sometimes, if you were working with a more sophisticated school, maybe they had some way of kind of bridging multiple classrooms together and kind of end up with a picture in picture like we're doing right now. But you'd have to dial into maybe that bridge, and then all the schools dial into that bridge at the same time, all using these IP addresses, almost like phone numbers, for the internet. And so, yeah, we had classrooms in Oregon that we would connect with every year, California, even as far away as Australia. And of course, those ones, because the time zones are so different, those would end up being in the dark. And I just remember one of the early days, I think it was Halloween, because I'm pretty sure all the panelists were in some sort of costumes, or maybe they're holding flashlights underneath their chin or something like that. And we dialed into an IP address that we thought was right. It ended up being, I believe it was a women's health conference in Australia. So we got like a big, what do you call it? Like a big auditorium full of doctors and nurses. And they're thinking like, where are these people? Why are they dressed in costumes, holding flashlights under their chin? And so we ended up talking with them for 10 or 15 minutes, and got to talk about polar bears and tell them a little bit about where we were. But that was pretty funny.
that is so great. And that's also been one of the best things about Buggy One is that it has offered an opportunity for polar bear scientists or people involved with polar bears to come just hang out and watch the bears. Because so often, field researchers, for example, when you're out studying polar bears, you're in a helicopter and you're getting close to the polar bears only when they've been tranquilized, and you're working on them really quickly and keeping them safe and measuring them and then leaving them alone. And it's not, you don't get the chance to just sit and watch bear behavior. That's actually super rare for most people, especially these days, to be able to go sit and watch bear behavior. So something that we've been able to do, again, thanks to Buggy One and FNA and Explore.org, is allow us every year to bring guests up every single year for well over a decade, 2 decades even, and just, hey, come spend a week with us, hang out on Buggy One, talk to people around the world. It's super fun. And also just watch polar bears and enjoy the bears. And we find that this is a beautiful way to connect people to, the species that they care so much about. We also have had just amazing conversations. I always learn so much from new people on Buggy One, different perspectives, just new things. And we've also been able to we strategically bring people together that we know either work on similar things or have similar research questions they're asking. And we have watched conversations happen that then turn into research papers and become new science because we get these folks together, stuck on this little buggy together for a week, and they get talking and, oh, that sounds so cool. Let's work on that. And then they go build their own relationship and do their own research. And that's been one of my favorite things about Buggy One and that this whole setup. It's very, very cool to see the magic of this place and sticking people together on a buggy. I'm going to throw some questions at both of you. We have some great questions from the audience. I guess you kind of answered this, BJ, but more maybe directly, like if you can remember, I don't know if you can. First time, long time is wondering when was the very first live broadcast done from Buggy One, do you think? Like what year would that have been? When did you go live?
Yeah, to classrooms, I think it would have been in 2006. I think they brought like an
Wow.
iMac out. Yeah, they had a whole iMac out there, and then they had like a 60-watt light bulb hanging from the ceiling. And they dialed in, I believe it was into a classroom, maybe back in Alaska or something like that, using whatever Apple had at the time for their first trial kind of point to point video conference stuff. So that's what I remember, maybe even with Skype, I guess. But yeah, that's what I remember. I think it was 2006. And then 2007, I came on, and that's when we started doing kind of the Polycom, some Skype stuff, that sort of thing.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah, and now so many organizations are able to do kind of online learning, which is great and wonderful. But you definitely paved the way, which is pretty special. Kyron, how warm do you keep the buggy during these winter months? Like, are you guys feeling pretty good there? Are you chilly?
I could actually, as we've been chatting here, I could feel the temperature rising. It gets warm. So we, on the old buggy here, a lot of the newer buggies, as they've been changed, they've switched over to a different heating method, a hydronic system. And we've always wanted to maintain. We've got a big propane stove. Maybe you caught a quick glance of it when we walked into the back, and we've kind of held on to that thing for all these years. It keeps us plenty warm. That stove puts out a lot of heat, but like just not long before the broadcast here, we cooked our lunch on that stove as well. So lots of Tundra pizza nights happening out here, and for that reason, we haven't wanted to give that stove up, but we are able to, yeah, keep it plenty warm enough in here. When we got bears in the area though, and we were dropping windows, that's when we'll start to see it chill off quite a lot.
Yeah, I love a Tundra pizza. BJ, this is kind of a funny question from Psy0967. How many people on average in one?
Oh, wait, can you say that again? You broke up just a little.
Oh, sorry. How many people on average fit into Buggy One?
Well, it kind of depends on the day. You could
Yeah.
get, comfortably. It's sort of like, 4 to 6 people is like really nice in there because it is a smaller buggy than the touring buggies. But, I think we've had as many as like probably 40 in there because there was a day that we had to go rescue. There was a bunch of tourists and their buggy got either stuck in the mud or something broke. I can't remember. And they needed to get back to town for a flight. So we backed Buggy One up to their buggy and we loaded all of the tourists on along with our scientists. We had people sitting on the beds, sitting on the floors, sitting on the counters, and I believe we had close to 40 people in there. So, but it's not very comfortable if you smash 40 in there.
No.
Uh,
And we've had a couple good social evenings on Buggy One as well, and that makes for kind of a good party because no one can hide anywhere. So you have to have
no,
good conversations with people, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah, she can fit a lot if she
hard to
wants
be a
to.
wallflower
Definitely.
on those
Yeah,
buggy on those parties. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, nowhere to go. Okay, another question, Kyron. This is from Glass Interrupted number two. Is the area you're in protected? Like, is it a park or where are you?
Yeah, so we're in the wildlife management area, and the trails that we're driving around on are old military trails from way back in the day. And so there are, like Elisa had mentioned, there's only so many permits that are allowed to operate in here. Uh, and the buggies are, I can't remember the exact number of permits. Elisa may recall, or BJ, but it is somewhat protected in that way that not just anybody can visit the area. And then
Excellent.
actually just
And
near
then,
here, as well as is the Wapusk National Park, I should say, is not that far off. Just a little further east down the way, is Parks Canada Wapusk National Park.
yeah, that's actually a great shout there. And that's where the Cape Cams are, and that's a really special area for polar bear denning. Thanks, Kyron. BJ, how bear proof is Buggy One?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we've never lost a tourist to a bear, so that's good. It's quite secure. Although, there was a couple years ago that we were parked out at Cape Churchill doing some extended work on the cams out there, and there was a bear that was quite aggressive in pulling the panels off of the buggy. Now, there was no worry that the bear was actually going to get into the buggy because, of course, it was kind of standing on its hind legs, but it was ripping the metal clad, kind of siding off the outside of the buggy wherever it could kind of get its teeth and claws underneath. We ended up scaring that bear off just because we didn't want to have it hurt itself chewing on metal, but also didn't want the buggy to get hurt. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty safe out there. You do, when you hear a loud pop, maybe in the middle of the night, if you're sleeping on the buggy, you kind of wonder, "Ooh, wow, is there a bear trying to break in or something like that?" So that is something that happens, I think, or at least to me. But no, it's all pretty safe up there.
Oh, great. So that question was from Rose Finney 4219. Thank you very much. There's a lot of great questions here. So we had a question from Leslie Moravchik, about how the polar bears are doing with climate change. That's a great question, Leslie, and we're gonna dive more into that throughout the season. I will mention that these Western Hudson Bay polar bears, where they are right now, they have seen a lot of changes with their sea ice. So these bears are on land up to about 4 weeks longer than their grandparent bears would have been. We have seen, as a result of that, a decline in this population from about 1,200 polar bears in the 80s to just over 600 today. So we've lost about 50% of them. There are still many beautiful polar bears to watch. You're still going to see great polar bears, and they're going to mostly look good. So when we talk about polar bears declining due to climate change, it's not necessarily that we're seeing like adults starve to death all the time. Polar bears are losing access to their sea ice. They're not eating as much, but a healthy adult can kind of make a go of that and still eat enough, or figure out how to like be okay. If they really had all their ice taken away, that would be a serious problem, and we might get to that point. Right now, that's not it. What we're really seeing, and why this population has shrunk for the most part, is because there's extra pressure on moms. So it's harder for female polar bears when they have that less ice and less food to get pregnant, to stay pregnant, to nurse cubs, and to get those cubs up into adulthood, or at least subadulthood, and then have those subadults grow into adults. We're putting pressure on those early stages, so moms and cubs are extra vulnerable, and we will talk a lot more about that throughout the season. Thank you for that question. I want to just take a pause here. We still have some great questions, but I would like to just highlight, while we have the chance, I think one of the coolest things that Buggy One has been able to do, and that is work with Google Street View. That was just a really special project that I think is worth highlighting. And I know we have a couple, maybe we have a quick video clip Albert can tell us. But BJ, you were so important in that project. Maybe you could just mention the Google Street View with Buggy One project, how that went.
Yeah, maybe use this tool at home to kind of
Yeah.
scope out your neighborhood, or maybe look at the front of a restaurant or something before you go visit, or whatever. I don't know. But Street View, of course, is kind of omnipresent now. You just go into Google and kind of zoom around and decide where you want to check out. You just drop your little person on there, and you can zoom around, right? Well, long time ago, I can't remember what year where that was, but Google came to us in the early days of Street View and said they wanted to map the tundra, and it would be really sweet if they could actually get a polar bear on the Street View itself. And so this was before they, had maybe like the full rig that they you see on the top of the cars now. And so we had to come up with a way to get one of the street view cameras on the buggy itself. So we almost made like a backpack because the rigs that we were using were similar to what they were using to map the national parks with a backpack. And so we found a way to make Buggy One wear the street view, which ended up being on the roof, kind of on the upper passenger side top. And we bolted that whole thing down. We'd load it full of batteries, and then we go drive laps around the wildlife management area. And I haven't checked it recently, but as of a couple of years ago, those maps were still on there. And there was one spot out there, kind of at the end of the area, where there was a bear laying in a place where the road hit a fork, and it was a very chill bear. We'd been watching it for several days, and it didn't seem to care what anybody did. And so we very slowly drove all the way around that bear, getting street view images. So if you look really hard, you might find a polar bear there on the street view imagery from the wildlife management area outside Churchill.
That's so funny. And I actually think that's a good point to make too, some of these bears and in the wildlife management area. So these bears are free to roam anywhere they want to go. This is not a fenced area. The bears can go up and down the coast anywhere. And some bears would choose not to go in this area. They're going to look at a buggy and be like, oh, that's weird. No thanks. Other bears are curious and come in purposefully to check the buggies out. Like, this is interesting. I'm very bored. Let's see. And then other bears don't care at all. Like that one, they're just, maybe they're used to it, that they don't care. They're just gonna sleep and uh, have us watch them, and that's just really great too. We love that. Okay, we've got, I guess, a question, Kyron. How many buggies are out there, and how long would a tour be for someone? And I know it's quite variable. And that's from Otis Storm
Yeah,
number
so
one.
okay, I think, at the moment, same thing, that number does vary a little bit, but I think today there's maybe six or so buggies that we're seeing around in the area. And they'll typically leave, mid-morning, and then they return mid-afternoon around 4:30 or something like that is when they return back to dock. Um, and that has to do a lot with, as we're getting towards the winter, the days are getting a lot shorter. So they're leaving, after first light, and then it doesn't take long for that sun to be going back down, which is why they return at 4:30. But it's a good full day, and it gives you plenty of time to tour around and explore the trails out here and find lots of polar bears before you gotta head back to town.
And then, so this is a quick question from Rebecca Johnston, 4522, asking about vocalizations of polar bears. So they really aren't very vocal, but we do hear them kind of chomping to each other. Moms will vocalize a bit with their cubs. BJ, I know you've been involved in some vocalization stuff with polar bears. Are polar bears, what have you heard?
Yeah, you really don't hear it very often. It's especially from the buggy itself is maybe in an instance where they have a couple agitated bears. So maybe,
Mm.
if there's a male coming and there's a female with cubs, then you might hear mom, bark at the kids to get them back closer or to warn the male if he is getting too close. That's pretty rare though. You don't really hear much of that. Um, and, in other instances, I've been down the bay a little bit further south where there was a food source and you had a couple bears coming in, and then you heard a lot of vocalizations as they were challenging each other and try to get to the food itself. But most of the time those bears, like you described, they're just kind of hanging out waiting for the sea ice to form. So there's not a lot of reason to waste energy yelling at each other. They're just going to take some naps and cruise around, wait for the ice.
Yeah, yeah, I think I was just talking to someone recently about that. They were asking like, "Oh, how often do polar bears roar?" They'd seen this video where a polar bear was roaring, and not to say it doesn't happen. Like, I'm sure, especially when males are in mating season, there's some vocalizations, but they're really not like roaring at us out there or roaring at each other or doing these kind of big like lion type standoffs or anything. Yeah, they're relatively quiet for such a big animal. Hmm. Kyron, this is from Michigan Daffodil 7561. How many months of the year is the buggy manned? Like, how often are people on it to observe polar bears?
So we head out in October, mid-October, so right around now, and we're spending, each day out here, provided the weather and everything is going well for us. And then we make our way just beyond probably mid-November is typically kind of when we look to start wrapping things up. And that does fluctuate a little bit depending on, the conditions and stuff here. Sometimes, if we have a lot of cold weather and we see that ice forming, we will see the bears leave a little bit earlier. But that's kind of, I'd say, what the consistent season year to year is around that time.
That's great. Hey BJ, we have a note from John B. Gunter, who's the owner of Frontiers North Adventures. He says, drop a pin on the Street View polar bear. So I'll have to do that if we can get
Yeah,
that
I'll
started
try
as
to. I'll
well.
see if
Yeah,
I
thanks,
can
John.
dig around. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, see if I can find that one. John, it was over by the lodge. It was one of the little islands of willows over by the lodge. If you can find it.
Okay, we'll have to take a look. Yeah, and thanks, John, and thanks again for all your support with Buggy One over the years. Some of our favorite things I've mentioned to do with Buggy One was to talk to classrooms around the world, and over the years we have reached millions of people. We actually started to look back at all the numbers, and it was pretty overwhelming. But millions of people, over 100 countries easily, and just classrooms right across the globe. We really have been able to bring polar bears to so many people. We've been so grateful. Some of the partners that we've hosted on the buggy for educational or outreach or news, even outreach and media, includes Discovery Education, Apple, of course, Google, BBC, Good Morning America, all sorts of different news crews. There has been just so many people that have come to Buggy One and hosted something from Buggy One with us. They've seen this online, they've been inspired, and they've reached out, and we've just had so much fun. BJ Cloud is watching, of course. Hi, Cloud. Thanks so much.
Hi,
Wondering,
Cloud.
do you have a favorite memory from Buggy One? We love Cloud. Yeah, is there a memory that stands out? I'm sure you have so many.
Yeah, I mean, I spent so many years out there. It's just so many fond memories. I think, kind of collectively, just all of those super interesting people that we had come up and
Hmm.
see, and some of these people had studied bears for quite a while before they really got to sit down and actually enjoy the bears and just kind of watch them and observe them. So that was always pretty special. And then, of course, we were always bringing up folks from the educational world, yeah, and to have someone that's been a lifelong teacher and be able to give them this experience to be able to come up and educate from the tundra, but also then experience these bears so closely was like just super cool to see. I think on the big scale, like working with BBC was very cool. Trying to bring a live stream again, like when streaming was a little bit more difficult to do from the buggy and then other places around Churchill. That was pretty neat to kind of work with these people that's what their whole life was. It's just TV broadcasts and kind of the sheer number of people it took to make all that stuff happen and to be able to integrate in with their crew and kind of utilize the tools that we built for our small streaming platform and be able to use that for something as big as BBC was like it was just one of the neatest things for sure.
That is so cool. I love that. Yeah, there's so many good times on the buggy. I would always love it when people got to see their first polar bear on Buggy One, especially because I got to see my first polar bear on Buggy One. And also, Good Morning America was a huge one, and I think that was the last year you worked with us and helped pull that off. And that was just so fun to have like Michael Strahan on Buggy One, sleeping in one of those bunks, wedging under there to have a little rest at like five. What time did they show up that day? 3 or 4 a.m. or something in the morning,
3 or
and we were
morning
ready
or
to
something
roll.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that was so
yeah.
wild. That was super fun. Yeah, Kyron, do you have a favorite time on Buggy One?
I think actually I know COVID was a tough time, but that was sort of a unique
Mm,
situation for us here. I live in Churchill, and so that gave us the opportunity, even though there wasn't traveling and that sort of thing happening, we were still able to get Buggy One on. We were still able to get the live cams rolling through that fall season, and in that during that time, that season, so we were the only for most of the season, we're the only buggy out here, and I mean. You're never going to see that happen again, right? I mean, that all on its own
hmm.
is a very unique experience, but that season was crazy. We had the triplets that year. We had a mom with three cubs. We had a Wolverine on the camera. I remember we had a pine marten bouncing down the trail in front of Buggy One. And then I also got to see the most bears in one area ever when there was a seal kill out on the flats, and we had 21 bears gathered around the buggy, and we got to kind of watch that whole thing play out. So I don't know. I think that just that entire season was probably my favorite memory.
I mean, that's pretty special. That is very, very cool. I like that. I got to see a Wolverine once. I was also with BJ, I think. It was years before that, but man, they're so neat. That would be, I don't know if Explorer's a Wolverine cam. That's probably absolutely possible to pull off for anyone. But when you ever get to see one, they're pretty special, wild little creatures. So we have a question here from Joanna Giovanna Benz. Have you noticed any increase of polar bears approaching communities to scavenge for food? And it's a really great question, and this is something that Polar Bears International is increasingly has our eyes on. So one interesting thing, particularly in Churchill, that's happened in the last year or so, is that the indoor garbage dump burned down. So now there is an outdoor dump again outside of town. But there has been an increase in polar bears there. And Kyron, maybe you can talk about this because you've been helping put up an electric fence and things out there.
Yeah, so that's been kind of really interesting to take part in. We've got a number of electric fences. If you tune into some of the other Explorer cams and looked out at Cape, you'll notice that we have one out there as well. And so the big goal is that coexistence. We want to make sure we're keeping bears safe and we want to keep people safe as well. And so out at the landfill, it was really great that we were able to assist and get the electric fence up and running there to prevent the bears from gaining access to that area. And yeah, no, it's been a learning curve. The bears are very intelligent. They've got lots of time at this time of year, and so you know, building these fences, we had to take into consideration a lot of different things. And over time, we're going to continue to adapt and observe and learn how to build up a better and more efficient fence. But overall, I see them being a really effective tool to keep those bears safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Churchill is such a wonderful model for other communities that deal with polar bears across the Arctic and have polar bears spending more time on land. We want to keep polar bears safe and in the wild and away from garbage, and we want to keep all the people safe as well. So learning these lessons in Churchill can really help us further support other communities too. Something that we'll also talk about this season that we've been doing more of is community exchanges. So having people from different communities across the north that live with polar bears come together to share their knowledge, share their perspectives. We can all learn from each other. And then at Polar Bears International, we're really trying to get like tools and techniques, both developing new things, and then getting them into the hands of people all across the Arctic. So yeah, it's a very, very good question. Something that will not go away anytime soon. So it's good that we are thinking about it. Um, Okay, with that, okay, one last question and then we're going to start a wrap up. But thank you everyone for all your questions today. BJ, I'll ask you. This is also from Diana P. Have you ever had a polar bear follow you from the buggy to your car?
Oh, that's funny. No, there's definitely a few bears that would follow you along the lodge. If you can imagine, maybe Albert can bring up a picture of the lodge. But we might park at night on the lodge, which is kind of like a space station. You back up to it, and then you kind of open your back deck, and you can walk from one vehicle to the next without getting on the ground. And occasionally, you'd have a bear that would follow you from your buggy and then kind of keep working its way down the lodge. So that was always kind of a little bit
Mhm.
interesting. Also, you're really happy that you're that far off the ground and they can't get to you. But no, I never had any bears. There's some pretty good safety procedures up there. And whenever we park the buggy, we look closely for bears in the parking area. And then when we transfer to the ground, you always have people that are looking out. And, again, it's kind of in an area that there's maybe a few less bears, but it's not impossible for them to be. So you kind of don't spend a lot of time goofing around on the ground. You just get loaded up in the car and head back to town. So, no, really, for all the time that I spent around bears, and I think the common perception around bears, which if you ask the average person, they'd say that they're the ones that are gonna try to get you. Really, we were quite safe. We were pretty fortunate to be able to just observe bears for so long and didn't have any incidences. So great experience all around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are very lucky to be in a very safe area in Churchill with a lot of people that take polar bear safety very seriously, as do we. So we've got a pretty great setup there. So there's a couple more questions coming in. The polar bears you see on the cam, some of them are going to hang around all season. Others will come in and out of frame. So it's hard to tell individuals sometimes, but when we can, we do, and there will be bears around. And if there are, we will bring them to you. As we kind of say goodbye to our beautiful Tundra Buggy One, we do want to make sure that we're thanking everyone. And there were so many people involved with making Buggy One successful over the years, but we really want to give thank yous where we can. So, of course, we mentioned John Gunter, Frontiers North Adventures. Truly, without them, none of this possible. Explore.org and the Annenberg Foundation. I mean, hopefully, I mean, that can go without saying, but such deep gratitude for everything that they've done to allow us to continue at the level we've had, to reach millions of people around the world, to be able to operate at this level with our outreach. It has been so, so, so special. And then also individuals that helped especially get things going in the beginning. A decade ago, 2 decades ago, there was none of this. And so building it from scratch took so much effort. Robert and Carolyn Buchanan, uh, in the early days, made Polar Bears International what it is today. They got us on the right path and helped this pull all of this off. Thank you so much. Daniel Zatz, who BJ mentioned, and then a huge also shout outs to Dr. Don Moore, who was one of the OG panelists and who's one of just our favorite people in the polar bear world. He's always a delight to have up there, and he helped us get our outreach going, as well as Julian Reed, who really started Tundra Connections and started this kind of educational component to what we're doing out there. What an amazing program, and to see how it's grown and evolved has been absolutely incredible. And we could not have done it without Julene. BJ, your partner in crime, KT Miller, of course. We got to give a big shout out to KT, especially with like the BBC and Good Morning America, all those things. Because I was no help to you at all. Like, goodness knows I was useless when you were having any sort of tech concerns, but KT was there. She had your back, and yeah, anything that needed done, KT was there to do. And then we also can't forget Daniel J. Cox, who BJ, you started with Dan before even Polar Bears International, didn't you meet him? Well, yeah, a photographer a long time ago. Yeah,
Yep,
you
absolutely,
guys,
and really helped
yeah.
really helped kind of build the buggy to make sure it was good for cine and for photography, so that we could gather these great images from the buggy itself.
Yeah. And Buggy One and this whole Polar Bears International, everything really was built so much on photographers, people that loved polar bears and came up to see them every year and wanted to do something for the bears, and started Dan Gurevich started Polar Bears Alive, which has evolved into Polar Bears International. Now we are doing genuinely impactful, important research across the Arctic, talking to millions of people. We are doing so much for polar bear conservation, and it was truly born out of Churchill on a tundra buggy from a bunch of people that just love the bears. So how grateful are we? It's very cool. And for those wondering, we did have a few questions. Of course, we kind of saved it to the end, and we won't talk too much about it, but I think the secret's out. We are saying goodbye to this Buggy One because we do have a new Tundra Buggy One EV electric vehicle on its way to Churchill. Kyron, really briefly, can you give us an update on when that buggy's arriving?
Yeah, we're actually expecting it to roll in on the train on the 23rd. So, provided everything's on time, we'll be seeing it very soon. Of course, there's going to be a little period here where we get familiarized with the new buggy and we get it all set up, but you can expect to see it out on the trails in the next handful of days. Super exciting.
Very exciting. So there will be much more to come on Tundra Buggy One EV, I promise. And we will be giving also a huge thank you to the donors that made that happen. That's been an amazing project. So stay tuned and circle back. And if you are ever missing the original Tundra Buggy One, don't worry, because we do have it parked. We will have it parked outside of the Polar Bears International House in Churchill. And people can come visit it. You can take a look inside. We'll give little tours, but it will have a home. It's not going anywhere. We'll have it around for a very long time, which we're also very, very grateful about. We don't have to truly say goodbye, just maybe say goodbye to the Tundra portion of her life, but she will be parked with us for many years to come. So if you are curious about other things we're doing this fall, you can check out the explore.org schedule or polarbearsinternational.org schedule. We do have webcasts and live chats for the next several weeks into mid-November. We're going to be talking about different topics. So we've got, for example, this live chat on Thursday. We're going to be updating you on some really cool field research and different science that's going on in the polar bear world. Next week, we have a fun live chat about fat is fit, and we'll have someone who specializes in polar bear diet come talk about why polar bears need to eat fat. We also have some wonderful webcasts tomorrow. We have tools for schools. So if you're a teacher, an educator, a parent, or a student that wants to know more about what you can do in the conservation landscape for polar bears, we're going to have some really concrete ideas, a lot of fun things that you can be doing in your home, in your school, in your community. So many good things going on. Also, Polar Bear Week, the first week of November. Very excited for that. We have our friends from Snow Bear visiting us, and we'll tell you more about that. But it's a new short animated film that's being released, and they're going to come teach us how to draw a polar bear. They're going to be able to spend time with polar bears and get inspired. And we'll be talking more about animation and the art side of conservation, how important it is to marry the art with the science when we are trying to spread the love for polar bears. So huge thanks to BJ, to Kyron, to Albert in the background who made this all happen, to explore.org, to Frontiers North Adventures, to our staff that were feeding me questions. Thank you to everyone. There truly are so many people that are involved in all levels of this sort of work, and just can't say thank you enough. So thanks guys so much for being here. Super appreciate it. And thanks to the polar bears. All right, we'll see you out on the tundra. Bye everyone.
See you.
Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. A polar bear's life cycle is almost exclusively tied to the sea ice. Because polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, to breed, and sometimes to den, sea ice loss from climate change is their biggest threat, and the reason the bears are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN's Red List of Threatened Species. What we learn about climate change impacts on polar bears in Hudson Bay can be applied across the Arctic to help conserve other populations. Climate change is already affecting some populations of polar bears. Since we get most of our energy from fossil fuels, we are producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. You see, regular amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere act like a blanket around the Earth, trapping heat and keeping our planet at a stable temperature. However, when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for energy, we pump rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This buildup thickens the blanket, trapping too much heat, disrupting the climate, and melting Arctic sea ice. When Arctic waters are cold enough, the top layer freezes into a special type of ice called sea ice. Sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. It supports the entire Arctic food chain. Food from this marine ecosystem also sustains northern communities. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options.